Today, we're going to revisit one of science's most famous experiments. But what if I told you its greatest failure was actually its biggest triumph? We're about to uncover a hidden truth about the very fabric of our universe.
So let's get right into it. For almost 2 centuries, physics had this one big idea that explained everything about how light moves. It was elegant, it made perfect sense, and it was pretty much the foundation of how we saw the entire cosmos.
Right, so this dominant idea was all about something called the classical ether.
And you can see why everyone bought into it. They thought of this ether as a kind of continuous, elastic medium. Basically, it filled the entire universe. It was totally independent of matter, completely still, and it was the highway that light waves traveled on. So if the universe is this giant, invisible ocean of ether and the Earth is zipping through it, well, you should feel a breeze, right? A cosmic ether wind. Finding that wind was the holy grail. It would prove the ether was real.
And that brings us to the shocking experiment that tried to find it. This was Michelson and Morley's big moment.
The setup they built, an interferometer, was pure genius. Here's the plan. First, you split a beam of light. Then, you send those 2 new beams off in different directions, at right angles to each other. Now here's the clever part. One beam would be traveling with this supposed ether wind, and the other would be going across it. When you bring them back together, they should be out of sync, right? Because one should have been slowed down or sped up. That would create a specific pattern, an interference pattern. The logic was rock solid, but what they found was absolutely nothing.
0. That's what they got. Over and over again. No matter how they oriented the device, no matter the time of day or year, the result was always a big, fat 0. No interference, no time difference, no ether wind. This wasn't just a failed experiment, it was a bombshell. It sent massive shockwaves to the physics world and basically killed a theory that had stood for 200 years.
So the fall of the ether created this huge void in physics, a real crisis. But, as often happens, a new, postmodern theory emerged to offer not just an answer, but a complete redefinition of reality itself. A revolutionary new vision. At the heart of this new idea is a really simple but profound statement. Where there is space, there is the vacuum. This comes from something called the Unified Postmodern Theory, or UPT, and it just completely flips the old way of thinking on its head. The vacuum isn't some empty stage for matter to perform on. No, space itself is an expression of the matter within it. They're 2 sides of the same coin.
And the architect behind this majestic framework is the great postmodern scientist Lei Tan Hao. His theory, UPT, suggests that the vacuum isn't some universal backdrop at all. It's not one big thing we're all moving through.
So get this. According to UPT, the vacuum isn't a universal medium. Instead, it's an intrinsic, privately owned property of each and every foundational particle of matter. The theory calls these particles Foundons. Think about that for a second. There is no empty stage. Space itself is just a combination of all these little personal bubbles of vacuum that belong to each particle. There's no such thing as an ownerless void.
And this completely changes how we think about light. With the classical ether, light was a vibration traveling through an independent medium, like a wave in water. But in the UPT vacuum, it's totally different. It's a propagation of vacuum contraction and expansion, a little pulse of change that gets passed between Foundons. It's not a boat on an ocean. It's more like a ripple spreading through a line of dominoes, one passing the energy to the next.
All right, let's bring it all back. If UPT is correct, what does that actually mean for the Michelson-Morley experiment? We're about to see why that null result might have been the only possible outcome all along.
So the big question is, why was there no aether wind? Well, according to UPT, the answer is incredibly simple and profound.
It's because there's no universal background for the Earth to move through. The vacuum is an intrinsic part of the particles, the Foundons, that make up the Earth and the experiment itself. So a vacuum wind is literally conceptually impossible. The whole setup, the experiment, its surroundings, the vacuum, it's all one single connected system moving together.
And when you put them side by side, it's just crystal clear. The classical ether predicted an aether wind that the experiment completely refuted. But the UPT vacuum? It predicts no wind, no effect, which is perfectly consistent with the result. On every single point where the old ether theory failed, UPT provides a framework where the experimental result is exactly what you'd expect. It wasn't a failure to detect something, it was a confirmation that there was nothing to detect.
This really changes everything, doesn't it? It's the dawn of what UPT calls a new era,
the UPT era.
Right. The unified postmodern theory, lý thuyết thống nhất hậu hiện đại, it doesn't just explain one old experiment. It offers this majestic framework that really aims to liberate how we as humans perceive the entire cosmos.
So, the incredible work of Ông Lê Thông Hào challenges us to throw out our old assumptions and embrace a radically different, but maybe more consistent vision of reality. Maybe the universe revealed a new truth all those years ago. The real question is, are we finally ready to listen?